Hello and welcome to Film Obsessive. This is Paul Johnson. I'm here today with Signe Rosenlund. She is the director of a new short film. It's called A Home on Every Floor. It is unique in its approach and it is absolutely mesmerizing. So, Signe, welcome to Film Obsessive. And can I have you do a brief introduction to what your film is and does?
Thank you so much. That's a very kind introduction. A Home on Every Floor is a short documentary that sort of explores childhood and memories in a bit of a, I would say, un, not unnormal way, but we've tried to sort of explore some new cinematic methods. And it's based on a poem written by a poet called Hannah Asifal, and she lives here in Oslo, where I'm also based, and it's about her upbringing in a communal housing complex in Grünerløkka, which used to be this workers' area in the city, and now it's completely gentrified. Yeah, it's basically about upbringing and sort of the good and bad things that can happen in social housing. And I really wanted to make this film because the stories that are written about social housing are it's usually seen as a place for people with difficulties in Norway. And Hannah really drew me in when I heard the text for the first time, and I felt like she really described, you know, everything that sort of constitutes a home. Even though your neighbors have problems, it can still be a really wonderful upbringing. So I love the balance between it, and that's why I wanted to make the film. Yeah.
Okay. Um, it's such a unique approach. I mean, perhaps not unprecedented to mix different styles in a film that we might or might not call documentary. And I want to get more into that in a minute. But let's just focus on Hannah, your subject, for a minute. She's a poet, and you said that the film's narrative is is it a poem of hers? Can we call it? Like, is it a poem? Is it adapted from a poem, or is it a performance of her poetry? How would you characterize that?
Well, it's definitely her poem, and she wrote it years before we made this film, so she didn't write it to make a film in
Hmm.
that sense. And she does spoken word, so her poems are usually heard and experienced and not read. Um, and so I saw her perform this poem during a festival in 2020. Like it was the summer and the lockdowns had sort of opened up a bit, so we were allowed to go out for a bit. And yeah, I would say the film is an adaptation of Hannah's poem, and it's taken some artistic freedoms, or how you would say it in English, but like we've sort of used the poem and bent it even further in the sense that we've sort of recreated this universe that she's describing, but it's not documentary in the sense that you sort of try to make everything exactly the way it was. It's more um, bringing the audience into an idea of these lives that Hannah is describing, or the rooms that these people lived in. And yeah, that's kind of where all the I think you call them dioramas in the US, but we call them miniatures.
Hmm.
So we sort of built uh, a miniature of the housing complex that Hannah grew up in to film. And there are other filmmakers who've done that as well. I don't know if you've seen the feature film Mother of All Lies. It's by a Moroccan filmmaker called Asma El Mudir. She does the exact same thing. And but that film was also it's sort of released at the same time as ours, so I hadn't seen that. So I've seen use of sort of miniatures in art. There are several artists who've used it to sort of work with memory, and it's kind of an easy, cheap way of getting into rooms that you can't enter because of a myriad of other reasons. And it's yeah, it was just a lot of fun. I'm gonna sorry now, my answer was a bit long, but you can please interrupt if you
No,
want me to.
it's fascinating to me, the approach. First of all, in that you are working with subject matter that is not normally the province of documentary filmmaking, does not normally begin in poetry. There's no rule that says it can't, but it seems like that's more the exception than the rule. When you're doing that, it would seem to warrant an approach that is at least unconventional. I used to teach units in my classes on nonfiction filmmaking, on animation and documentary, and one of the first questions I would pose to my students is why? Why would you choose to animate a documentary film? One of the reasons as well is because you don't have footage of what happened. And so here, in a way, it's kind of a reenactment, except that you don't have figures inside your miniatures. It's all narrated from Hannah's perspective. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you're choosing to do as a director, to animate and bring to life the essentially static diorama
Yeah.
or miniature.
Yeah, that was a huge challenge, actually, bringing everything to life. And to me, I come from a background of more like traditional documentary. I've done, you know, the fly
Mhm.
on the wall thing, and I've done reconstructions with actors, and I've done so I've kind of tried a lot of different things. And the idea here was that what Hannah is describing is real. It's a real problem. Like social housing is being sort of there's less and less of it, and the housing policies in Norway are very very sort of based on survival of the fittest. We have like one of the most neoliberal housing markets in Europe, so it's really really hard to get into the housing market, and that's sort of creates this ball of people like Hannah being moved further and further out of the city center. So she had this, the text has this sense of realness in addition to being Hannah's experience. But I really, I'm really interested in point of view when working with other people's stories, and knowing that Hannah grew up in this housing complex when she was quite young. I didn't want to present this as like uh, the story of about this building. You know, there were tons of other people in that building in that time that didn't contribute to this project. So the idea of making this diorama or miniature of the building and make Hannah be the one sort of interrupting in the images, she's like moving boxes and looking in windows, is sort of to underline the fact that this is indeed Hannah's uh, story, and it's her view of her own upbringing. Um, but we had a lot of different tests where we worked with the miniatures are built in this it's called papier-mâché in Norwegian, papier-mâché. Uh, you understand?
I do. My mother actually
Yeah.
was, we called it paper mache, and my mother was a
Yeah, yeah,
paper mache
yeah, right.
artist for many years.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Cool. So it's quite a it's a material that it's easy to change. It's not
Hmm.
wood. It's not like uh,
Right.
when it's put together, it's put together. You could always change it and paint, repaint, do other things. And so one decision I took quite early when we started shooting was that almost every image had to have some sense of life. And that could be some wind in a curtain, or it could be the TV running in the background, or it could be, you know, some tiny thing that would have to happen in the image, or the cigarettes in the boxes that have like smoke coming out. And that was just because, you know, nothing happened in the images. Some of them, Hannah was like moving in and out and looking in different directions or putting things, moving things. But apart from that, it wasn't much action. And that's hell when it comes to editing. You know, there's no progress. Nothing's. So, so we worked a lot with sound design in this film, actually, to make it come alive and to make it feel like a community and an apartment building, and like create the sounds of the city, create the sound of the neighbors, and that specific neighbor made those sounds, and you have to have like all these different sounds of life in a scenery that's very static, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so there were a lot, and then there's the music, and there are a lot of pans up and down and back and forth and stuff to sort of keep it flowing in a sense visually.
I will just
Uh,
say, as a viewer, it's really it's a lovely and engrossing experience. I mean, it's simultaneously both it feels very immersive, but at the same time, you're constantly breaking that immersion with Hannah's presence as a narrator, if you will, and peeking through the windows and sliding into view. I really can't think of anything quite like it. And one of the things I'm wondering too here is did something prepare you for this? As you're going through your education and your classes, and you said you're trained in documentary, did you experience things that kind of led you at this point in your life to direct a documentary that would employ miniatures and animation and an external narrator,
yeah,
etc.?
no, actually, well, I think it was a bit of a coincidence. There are two things I would say. It was Corona. We
Hmm.
were stuck in our homes a lot. So, it makes you think about your home a lot more. You sort of notice the stuff that you put on the wall and you rearrange. And so many people like painted and stuff during COVID because, what else was there to do?
Right.
And the other thing is that I watched a few of the short films of this Swedish director animator called Nikki Lindroth von Bar. She has she's made a short film and a series of shorts called The House on Netflix. She's quite big in Sweden, and she has this amazing animations. And there's a lot of humor. The entire world is sort of built by her, and it's animation, so that sort of differs from us. And I think the reason why this happened was because the apartment building that Hannah grew up in, it exists. It's in Oslo. It's not far away from where I live, but it was under construction. So there was no way we were going to go in there and film anything. And I worked with a very, very good production designer called Julia Fossland, and she had done something similar in theater, in a Norwegian theater play a few years earlier. So I think she was the one who had the idea of sort of building this, and we were quite dependent on her for the sort of success of how things worked because she built everything but from scratch, and she also came up with sketches and ideas, and so it was yeah, I think it was a lot of coincidences, but also just going, and I remember going into the studio when we had like our test day, shooting with just like blank miniatures, no paint, no detail, no nothing, and just having Julia, the production designer, come in and out of the frame, and and I just saw that there was something there. It just worked in a sense. And what's so nice when you work with miniatures is also that it's so easy to control. You have maximum control of everything that's happening in the image. So it's a bit like a director's dream, coming from classic documentary, where you're like,
You don't have to
okay,
worry about people wandering into the range of the
no,
viewfinder.
yeah,
Right.
no, things are out of focus, or people talk and you don't have the mic on them yet, and or that kind of thing. That's the complete opposite. So I just loved sort of going into this project and also developing it during COVID. We had a lot more time than we would usually have, and just working on detail and working on every room and what was going to be, and like each room symbolizes a character in Hannah's poem. So we worked with their story, with Hannah's childhood photos, with like different sort of looks and styles, and how it would work on camera, which camera we should use, how we should film it. It was a lot of fun, actually. And when we sort of got there, even though the production design's a bit rough, it's not like, you know, anything fancy. Yeah, it just felt like it all kind of came together.
And
Yeah.
then has it been out in front of an audience?
The film?
Hmm.
Yes, it's been in the festival run for about a year,
Hmm.
and we premiered last June at the Norwegian Short Film Festival in
Hmm.
Grimstad, and since then it's been several festivals. We went to Doc NYC in the fall, and it's also been to Slam Dance in Utah. And the last big festival we went to in North America was Hot Dogs Festival
Okay.
in Toronto. So it's been going really, really well, and that's been so much fun. And just, it's a low budget film. There's a lot of heart in it. So many people have contributed. So, and I was also a bit like, it's a Norwegian film where all dialogue is in Norwegian. It only has subtitles. Is this gonna sort of, reach beyond our borders? But it obviously has touched some kind of nerve about, a topic that's relevant to many people
It,
across
it
the
has,
world.
and it's a topic that even though it's grounded in your observation and Hannah's specific experience in Oslo, is going to speak to people universally. I mean, people in our country are facing similar kinds of crises of, escalating rents everywhere, very few opportunities for home ownership, especially for people of your generation moving forward, into adulthood and careers. And I'm sure they're going to be very, very touched by its message. We also have the same, dilemma of corporate, ownership of residential housing that's really had a deleterious effect on the market here as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know if you've seen this Swedish documentary called Push. It's made by a director called Fredrik Hjerten. It was all around the world. I don't know, 2018, 19. And I think housing is one of, like, at least here we say that housing is the key driver of economic inequality, or the housing policies. So housing is just, it's sort of the foundation for life. And I think if we make a better housing policy, we can also solve a lot of other problems, you know? It can be addiction to drugs, it can be crime, it can be so many things. If people actually have the chance to have a home and not just buy homes, people can buy
Mhm.
homes, sure, but just to have a home that's a stable home in a neighborhood that feels good to live in and a sense of community. At least that's also a really important part of the film, like the sense of community they created even though they were all in low income housing. I feel like that's just something our politicians have forgotten a little bit about, because you know there's a lot of money in housing, and we've created a system where we allow certain people, or very few people, to own a lot of homes. And then they also hold a lot of power over people's lives, and they can sort of
Absolutely.
dictate the market. And like Ivar Tollefsen, the guy who bought up Hannah's old childhood home, he owns 160,000 apartments across 10 countries. And that's like, why would anyone want that? Or what's the point? For me, it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Why do we allow this to happen, in a sense?
I
Because,
don't
yeah,
have the
sure.
answer to that.
No,
You don't
I
have
don't
the
expect
answer
you
to that,
to.
but
No.
it's up to artists like yourself and Hannah to protest that, of course, and to draw attention
Yeah.
to it with your work. And thank you for doing that. Do you see yourself doing more work in this vein in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, I really loved it. We're working on a second film with Hannah now.
You
So
are.
that's exciting. Yeah. It's a very different subject. I'm not gonna say too much yet, but it's there's gonna be more in the miniature style
I'm
stuff.
excited to see more, Signa.
Yeah.
I love your film very much, and I just want to
Thank
say
you.
thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And we all look forward to seeing a home, a home on every floor, and your future work in the days in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much.